It's time for this week's Wrestling Perspective podcast. I'm Dennis Farrell. No Petey Williams this week. As you can tell by the headline, I have a true champion joining me this week. Matt Taven from Ring of Honor, who is the real deal, true blue Ring of Honor champion. Don't let anybody lie to you with that Jay Lethal crap. It's Matt Taven. Before I give you the gift that is Matt Taven, I have to do some housekeeping. That includes BlueChew.com. Look, if Matt was here right now, he'd tell you to take it. He'd probably say, look, the kingdom is hopped up on it. That's why they hold all these major belts. BlueChew.com. Go there. Use the promo code PERSPECTIVE. Perspective. They say if you say it 3 times, you remember it. I just tried it. I forgot. Anyways, go to BlueChew.com. Use the promo code PERSPECTIVE. Look, Blue Chew is made from the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis. It's chewable, so it works twice as fast as the blue pills. It's made in the USA, so it means it's cheaper. I can keep going on and on. If you use the promo code, you go to Blue Chew, we will send you your first order for free. You just pay $5 shipping and handling. Look, I know that if you're a Honor Club girl and you're listening, and maybe your boyfriend is a main eventer in bed, or maybe you're a guy listening and you think, well, I wish I can compete in a 60-minute Ironman match in my bed, but I always fall short and I lose in, the 12th minute. Not so bad. But with Blue Chew, you can ascend to the highest levels of bedroom wrestling with your significant other. You can walk out as a champ. You could have the crowd chanting, we want more, wrestle forever. This is awesome. With Blue Chew, that's the only way that happens. So go to BlueChew.com, use the promo code PERSPECTIVE, and be your own champion in the bed. Trust me, your mate, your significant other, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your loved one, it's Valentine's Day. They'll all appreciate it because nobody wants a jabroni. Nobody wants someone that won't put anybody over in the bedroom. Be the one putting everybody over. Give them the special Canadian destroyer in bed. I don't know. I'm running out of terms. So go to BlueChew.com. Use the promo code PERSPECTIVE. It helps the podcast. Heck, you know what? If you're still listening to this and haven't fast forwarded, I don't care if you take it or not, truthfully. Just use the promo code. It helps us. Blue Chew gives us money. With that, we use it to be on the radio and over 100 radio stations throughout the United States. So, do us a favor. We brought you Matt Taven. Taven, he really didn't want to do this, truthfully. He was like, wait. I tell you what, if you put a Blue Chew ad right at the beginning and you mention me a few times, I'll do the ad. He's like, I've been a Ring of Honor champion. I've been a 6-man tag team champion, but nothing thrills me more than being part of a Blue Chew ad. So here it is. This is me paying Matt Taven back for the interview. So do Matt Taven and myself a favor. Go to BlueChew.com, use the promo code PERSPECTIVE. Also, Matt Taven has nothing to do with this part, but if you go to whatforapparel.com, that is whatforapparel.com/WPP, Wrestling Perspective Podcast, you can buy yourself a Wrestling Perspective shirt. We've lowered the prices to make sure we try to undercut every podcast out there. We want to put people over profits. It's nice to see $1 here and there, but we want to see more people wearing our shirts than us making profits and being able to buy a steak dinner. So if you go to whatforapparel.com/WPP and buy shirts, we would be super thankful for you. Thank you guys so much. Now, on to some Matt Taven action. Here on the Wrestling Perspective, when Petey Williams can't make the podcast, I try to reach out and get someone better than him, which is pretty easy, believe it or not. which is pretty easy. So I reached out and could not believe that, in my mind, the Ring of Honor champion, Matt Taven, decided to step in for Petey Williams this week and talk some wrestling with me. So, Matt, thanks, man, for your time.
Hey, thanks for having me, and thanks for the proper introduction of calling me the Ring of Honor champion, because that's what I've been for the last couple of months, and, it takes a real jealous man like Jay Lethal to go and destroy the symbol of excellence that my title represented. But, also, when it comes to Petey, I've been wanting to say this for a long time. Petey Williams does not get the credit he deserves, especially with how wrestling has evolved and changed recently. Everyone under the sun is doing the Canadian Destroyer, and that's all thanks to Petey.
We talk about that religiously, and he's like perfectly all right with it. I think he was a little miffed that, Adam Cole renamed it because he went into this whole thing. And, as a fan, I can kind of go with him on that. And sometimes I kind of have to step back and go, Pete, it's the wrestling industry. You gotta live with that.
And I'm not sure if Adam himself renamed it or maybe an announcer renamed it for him. But I think everyone knows that the Destroyer is Petey's, and that was the innovator and the creator of it. And, now you see people exchanging them back and forth, which I don't know. But, it all stems back to the guy that brought it to the mainstream in the first place, and that's Petey.
Yeah, I got to tell you, before we really take a deep dive and talk wrestling, we're kind of like kindred spirits, almost brethren. I, too, am from Massachusetts, Brockton, Mass. I was born there, lived there until I was 7, and, I sport a Boston Red Sox tattoo. Love my Boston sports. And I am so jealous because you, at one point, were a member of the New England Patriots, I would say, marketing staff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting there in the front office every day, so I was in the sales and marketing department. I, in the offices of Gillette Stadium, driving to the stadium every day, running into the players all the time. That's what I went to school for, and what I actually ended up doing right out of college. And, it was all well and fine, and, it was a job that I'm sure I could have stuck with and been happy with in the long run, but I was just antsy. Like, I just had this lack of athletic output that I felt like I needed in my life, and I had a friend that I grew up with that I used to backyard wrestle with, and actually Warbeard Hansen used to be in our backyard wrestling federation as well.
Nice.
Who we just went over to see wrestle. I knew Hansen was also wrestling, and I just got bit by the bug, and I was like, oh, this could be, my outlet that I've been looking for. And then it was just one of those things where I was like, no, this is what I've wanted to do my whole life.
I've been lucky enough that I have actually become friends with one of my childhood favorite hockey players who was a Boston Red Sox. And this is outside the Cam Neely, Bork, Adam Oates group. It was Brian Smolinski. Might be a little bit outside of your... Okay. And I have...
Yeah, no, I know of. But, I would have to say the Bruins are probably the lowest on the totem pole when it comes to Boston sports, but not for my personal opinion, because I just never was a hockey guy. I always grew up playing basketball, so that occupied my winter sports. But, I'm surrounded by hardcore Bruins fans, so it's hard not to know every single one of them.
So I was kind of leading up to where they always say, never meet your heroes. And I was kind of lucky enough to meet Brian, become friends, and smoke cigars, drink beer, hang out with him. We both live in the same area here in Detroit now. Working with the Patriots, was that kind of the same way of never meet your heroes, but never work for the organization you grew up loving?
Yes and no. I mean, the Crafts themselves are some of the best people I've ever worked for, ever dealt with. They're really good, genuine people that care about everyone that works for that Craft Sports Group. There are the guys that you're like, wow, this guy is really a douche. Like Randy Moss is really, lives up to every bad thing you've ever heard about Randy Moss. On the other hand, I've had just kind of highs and buys and hellos and how are you with Tom Brady, and he comes off as the nicest person you'll ever meet. So it is, good and bad. There's always those people that you're like, oh man, I would have been better off not knowing that you were actually the bad person they say you are. And there's people that live up to expectations.
I'm kind of learned that same thing when I was doing fantasy football for ESPN. You interview, you talk to a lot of people, and there were kind of guys you go, boy, I hope I never have to interview that guy again because it was painful. Let's move on. You have become one of these guys that have come up through the Ring of Honor system from, a guy that was kind of putting over people to now a guy who is in one of probably the coolest throwback storylines I've seen, with destroying a championship belt, shades of, what was it, Mr. Perfect and Hulk Hogan, to co-champions, who's the real champion. And it really resonates with me as a guy who grew up watching and loving wrestling, to see you go from point A to point B in that time period. Have you inserted yourself as a locker room leader, and how hard is it in today's, I guess, wrestling atmosphere to be a locker room leader?
I mean, it's definitely difficult because everyone's going to have their opinion, and everyone's going to think they knows what's best for them, and in many ways, that's the way you have to have your mindset when it comes to wrestling is okay, I know what's going to make me get to the next level. But Ring of Honor has always had this locker room since day one. Like my first dark match was in '09, but really not until like 2011, 2012 was I, doing underneath stuff, and then finally signed something in 2013. And it's crazy when I look back on it and think about how I became a locker room leader, where you're growing out, you're kind of growing up through the system, and you're seeing all these guys who are just unbelievable all around you, and you're learning from all of them. And then all of a sudden one day you're that guy because some of them have left, or you just matured into that position. And then you look around and you're like, oh man, it's like me, Lethal, the Briscoes, these are the guys with the longest tenure here all of a sudden. And it's gotten back. Ring of Honor has gotten back to the locker room that I remember when I first got in there, of everyone really wanting to succeed and wanting everyone else to succeed as well. Ring of Honor has picked up so many unbelievable free agents in the last year, and when something like that happens, you always wonder what the locker room is going to be like with all these new faces. But to the benefit of Ring of Honor, they've chosen guys that are all fantastic people as well as wrestlers, and that locker room right now is probably the best it's been in a long, long time. And it's kind of easy to be one of those guys with the most tenure and one of those guys that can speak up when you have such a amazing group of talented guys in that locker room who are just looking for everyone to continue to succeed. I mean, we have stuff like Madison Square Garden coming up, and we've been on such a roll for the last 4 years, if not 5 years since our first pay-per-view. It's everyone wants to see that continue to grow, and everyone wants Ring of Honor to continue to keep going upwards, and see if we can really make this thing as big as we want it to be.
It's interesting because it seems like it's a 3-year cycle where every 3 or 4 years, other companies come in and raid Ring of Honor talent. And then everybody steps back and goes, oh my gosh, this is the death of Ring of Honor.
It's over. It's all over.
And then 4 months later, all of a sudden, you guys have created brand new superstars and have moved forward. 4 years later, those guys get plucked up. You guys keep doing it again. What is the secret of that? Because that's the one thing Petey and I talk about with Impact, is that's the one thing they can't do right now, or they haven't done in the past, is develop their own talent. But yet Ring of Honor, year after year after year, are just developing these guys left and right. You guys are like, I guess the New York Yankee farm system, just pumping out stars left and right.
I mean, I think that's always from Ring of Honor's office, keeping their fingers on the pulse and seeing these guys that are coming up and being able to see this guy is a Ring of Honor superstar in the waiting. There's guys like Mark Haskins where you go over to England and you see these guys get thrown on one show, and all of a sudden you're like, this guy needs to be here. Like this guy's fantastic. The Banditos of the world who are making an impact, and it's just like, this guy's got a future as well. Let's grab him. At the same time, like we were talking about, the leaders and the guys that have the tenure there always have had that chip on their shoulder of pride in Ring of Honor and wanting Ring of Honor to be the best. And there's never been an ego in there that, or especially right now, there aren't any egos in there that want to make sure these guys that are new coming in are kind of held back or pushed back, or oh no, that's all right, you can kind of stay there, the spotlight I've earned, I need to have my top I need to have my time on top. That's really not the case right now. Everyone and I think it's pretty apparent from our first couple of shows after the new year. A lot of people ended up exiting, and dorks online want to be like, that's it, it's over for Ring of Honor. And if you've seen any of the first couple of shows of this year, you'd be like, oh, well, I'm an idiot. Ring of Honor's back, and they're absolutely fine. So I would say that has a lot to do with the people making the decisions, knowing who are the young, hot talent that are making waves that would fit in Ring of Honor. And at the same time, like I said, guys like the Briscoes, guys like myself, guys even like that Melvin J. Lethal, always wanting Ring of Honor to succeed and doing what they need to do to make sure that not just themselves, but the new people that are coming in and everyone else on the roster continues to grow, which only makes Ring of Honor better.
Now, as a locker room leader, and you've mentioned Lethal and the Briscoes, do you guys ever sit around and discuss how you want to shape the locker room going forward? Because now that you're a locker room leader, you have a certain amount of pull now to shape either the locker room and or the company in the direction that you would like to kind of see it go in.
I mean, I don't think it's ever like, all right, let's all powwow it and let's all force it to go in this direction. I think it's more of a when you see something that you know is working, doing whatever you can to make that grow. And, obviously every once in a while there needs to be a little bit of discussion if something negative is going on or something that's not beneficial to the company is going on. But for the most part, it's like, you see the flowers start to sprout, and you got to provide it with the water and sunshine it needs to grow. And I always thought, like, ever since I've been in wrestling, and it's no secret that the wrestling business is very cutthroat and backstabby, and people will step on each other to get to where they want to get. But in my view, if someone's doing good or if a company is succeeding, it helps everyone. It's like even the other competition that's sprouting up, or the competition that's always been there. If everyone's succeeding, it helps wrestling in general. Like, I grew up, obviously, going through the Monday Night Wars and WCW and ECW, and it was like, if ECW is succeeding, it's just spreading wrestling throughout, the culture, and it's just getting more eyes on wrestling in general. And if people become wrestling fans, well, they're going to search out more wrestling, and they're going to probably end up at you.
You mentioned growing up watching wrestling. I'm always, curious about what other wrestlers' wrestling habits were, whether it's growing up or even now. I hear a lot of guys that say, when the wife goes to bed, maybe I'll sneak off and try to catch what I can. What were your watching habits growing up?
Oh, man, I was a wrestling lunatic. To the detriment of all my parents' furniture, because I would be watching wrestling and trying to moonsault off my parents' couches at the same time. But literally since I was 6 years old, I fell in love with wrestling. I'm from the Northeast. We're from very closed areas. And so WWE is the staple and the mainstay up here. But like I said, once I got bit with the bug, I wanted everything. I wanted to know everything about everyone, and bought and begged my mom to buy all the magazines. And when I became a teenager, or kind of a young teenager, was when the real wrestling boom of the late '90s, early 2000s happened. And man, where we grew up, you stay up till 2 in the morning or 1 in the morning to watch the Spanish station for ECW. And I can remember having my friends like sleep over, and we would pull all the mattresses out and be wrestling, just waiting for ECW to come on in the middle of the night, or watching the tape of Raw and Nitro that I taped the previous week or whatever. And I just engulfed myself in it. And it's one of those things I think now we're really living in like a special age where you can get anything just in the palm of your hand, because right now your phone, you can open up and you can watch matches from England, matches from Japan, matches from Mexico, obviously matches from the States. And it's an access that I wish that I had as a teenager, that I think it's really cool that wrestling fans are able to have now.
How often do you partake in that stuff now, being a family man on the road most of the time?
I mean, a lot of the time it's squeezing it in, hearing about something, watching it in the airport or at the hotel. Obviously, I'm home right now, so I like to make sure I watch at least some wrestling a day. At the same time, I've always thought it was very important to make sure you're not completely trapped in that wrestling bubble, so you can always get some outside influences on your career and your character as well. So I like to make sure I always watch wrestling. I'm telling you, anytime I'm doing cardio, wrestling is definitely on. But outside of that, I make sure that, especially if I hear something, fantastic's happen, I'll have to check it out. I always keep track of, what my buddies are doing who are elsewhere. I always love to watch my matches back. But for the most part, I try to watch every single thing at a Ring of Honor show in general if I don't see it live, because I'm a big guy to get changed and make sure I go to the monitor and watch the rest of the show. If I don't see it live, I make sure I watch it back once I get home. So, I think you have to make sure you know what your product is if you want to succeed at it.
I probably have to say this about once a show, but I really feel like the podcasts have really been instrumental in revitalizing the indie scene when fans take control and start pumping out its content, when wrestlers start pumping out their own content and building up fan bases. Now, are you a wrestling podcast listener? Because there are some guys that go back and forth like, not really, it's part of me unplugging, and other guys are like, I can't get enough of it. Where do you fall?
Well, I'm actually a big podcast listener in general. I'm one of those guys that constantly, like, if I'm in the shower, I have to set up a speaker to make sure I'm listening to something. Or if I'm running around, doing errands, I always have, like, music or a podcast on. So if I can't, physically watch something, I always have some sort of audio entertainment on. I'm one of those guys who definitely checks out all the wrestling podcasts, especially the big ones and the ones that are interesting to the young fan of me. The Bruce Pritchard podcast, when he talks about all the stuff that I was watching as a kid, I love it. I mean, I can't get enough of it. Obviously, there's so many wrestling podcasts out there. It's hard to keep up with all of them. But, I always get a little bit upset when I refresh my unlistened podcasts and I don't see anything. And then I'll go searching out some wrestling podcasts that I haven't heard before. But at the same time, again, I'm a big Boston sports fan. I'm also a big, I'm very interested in conspiracies and world news as well. So I try to make sure that I'm about 50-50 with wrestling podcasts and also making sure I get out of that wrestling bubble and make sure I know what's going on with society as well.
I got to tell you, one of my favorite podcasts, I think I've been listening to it for about 2 years now, is Hardcore History with Dan Carlin.
Yes.
Oh my gosh! I wish he would.
Very good one.
I wish he would put more than one out every 6 months, because that's
what I was saying. Like, they're long and they're good, but you go back to try to be like, is there a new one now? Is there a new one now? Is there a new one now? And it's tough when he doesn't pump out that much content, but they're very good.
Thank you. That's my sentiments exactly. Let's get back to this storyline that we were kind of alluding to earlier. earlier, which I really feel like is a throwback storyline, as I said. How much input have you had so far in this storyline going forward?
Well, I think that's one of the best parts of Ring of Honor is that, Ring of Honor is one of those places that if you come to the table with an idea, it'll get listened to. And I started to come up with this idea when Dalton was injured and we were supposed to wrestle in Lowell. And I knew, obviously, things that were going down the line from me being going to be gone for a little bit with being in Mexico and doing the anniversary show. So I started putting all these pieces of the puzzle together. And it was something that I truly believed that I was like, well, how do I force myself into getting the spotlight that I think I deserve? Well, if I start screaming to the masses that I am the Ring of Honor World Champion, then, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And, as we moved on from the Dalton forfeiture, which, he didn't actually forfeit the title to me, he just bowed out of the match, I started kind of having my wheels spinning of where do we go from there and how do I make this storyline come to fruition. But again, it's not just me. There's a lot of other creative input, but I definitely started basically turning the wheels on this one close to almost a year ago, and to see where it's come. And it's one of those things where you have the idea, and then the snowball just starts rolling downhill, and everyone starts adding on, and then things start happening, and it's like, all right, well, it fits here, and let's do this, and let's do that. And then again, like we were saying before, I've been a lifelong fan of wrestling, and when Stone Cold Steve Austin has a custom belt and he's throwing belts off bridges and stuff like that speaks to the teenage me. And I've defined my character for the last 3 years of being this, having this black and purple mystique to it and the purple rain. And I was like, well, I know exactly how I want to say I'm the real world champion. I'm going to come out with this big purple belt, and it's going to literally represent me in the way that I've built this character in the last couple of years. And it will be like the Bizarro belt to the Ring of Honor World title.
Boy, this has become one of these and look, I cannot say enough great things about this storyline because I'm old school. I firmly believe that there are a lot of storylines that need to take place over a year or two time period to really get every emotional roller coaster, every emotional opportunity out of it. This is one of these storylines that have really taken you up and down and around, and you sit back and you enjoy it. If this was something that was packed into 3 months, I think it would have been one of those forgotten storylines because it's just keep moving on, keep moving on, keep moving on. How hard is it to not rush something, even for you in today's wrestling world?
I agree, and that's almost a detriment of what we were talking about of there being so much content out there. Is that you really have to, if you continue pumping stuff out there and you don't have a long-term vision, you kind of blow through things quickly before people really have a chance to sink their teeth into it. But for me, I feel like mentally, as far as how I think about wrestling, I think very similar to you, and I wanted to start planting these little breadcrumbs as you went through the story. So let's say you haven't been watching it consistently and you go back and you watch a match from June and you're like, oh man, this is leading to where we are now. And that was always a goal of mine, to have a really slow build and really like kind of just slowly drag you by the nose until we get to exactly where we want it to be, and really plant all those seeds so one day you can kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together in your mind and in your memory, so we end up where we are now. But I am exactly the same way. I always wish that Flair and Hogan ended up wrestling at WrestleMania 8, but I had that as a big inspiration, especially when I start calling myself the real Ring of Honor World Champion. I'm like, all right, if I was to rebook Flair coming in all the way to WrestleMania 8, how would I have done it? And it's not exactly the storyline that has happened now. And I don't want to take all the credit because there's a fantastic staff at Ring of Honor, but it's that mindset of I loved how they stayed apart from one another, how it was teased, and then it should have happened and it didn't. But me and Lethal will meet at the 70th anniversary.
We're going to talk about that here in a couple minutes. I do want to say, or at least ask this. With this slow burn storyline, and you don't really see a lot of it right now on a lot of the TV companies, do you think people could look back at this and go, you know what, long-term storylines really work? Look at what these two guys are doing. Maybe even change the industry back to, and not all the way, this is an A storyline. Maybe some of your B's and C's can move a little bit quicker. But do you think a lot of people that are running TV companies or wrestlers can look back at this and go, I think this is working?
I hope so. I hope so. I think, I think wrestling is based on stories, no matter what, no matter how athletic we all get, no matter how innovative the business gets, no matter how amazing one match might look from an athletic contest, people still want stories, and even if you think about sports in general, it's a year-long story to the Super Bowl. We talk about the off season and then, the trades and then what's happened in the preseason and the injuries and regular season. Is the team have chemistry? Is there something wrong with it? And then can they make a run in the playoffs? Can they do it in the Super Bowl? And that's months and months and months of people being invested to finally you get to the pinnacle of and the payoff of what the story is. And, wrestling is a combination of sports and entertainment. And even when you look at any sort of a good sitcom, they have a storyline throughout their whole season that you have to wait till the season finale for it to pay off. And, your average sitcom is 12 episodes, 10 episodes. You have to wait at least that long to finally get the payoff from episode one. So I think that, just us as humans, we want to be told a story, going all the way back to the Native Americans in a circle around a drum. They pass down these stories from one generation to the next. Like that's what that's our form of entertainment that we have ingrained in us is storytelling. And that's what I've always been a fan of as a wrestling fan. And if this helps in any way that there's more stories in wrestling, then I one day I'll probably be able to look back and pat myself on the back, much like how Petey Williams should pat himself on the back for showing everyone the Canadian Destroyer that they're now stealing from him.
And doing a subpar podcast, by the way. Let's not forget about that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And also putting out a wrestling podcast.
Barely a wrestling podcast. I do have to bring this up. About 3 weeks ago, we had Dave Chris on, and he had said that he feels like that OVE versus the Kingdom, you guys are really close to getting this thing done. There's a couple paperwork that needs to get signed, some people that need to kind of check the check marks off on that. That's 3 weeks ago. You probably may not have any updates, and I'm probably springing this on you now, but is there any updates to Kingdom versus OVE? Because this has been one of the most entertaining Twitter wars that I've seen in probably a year. It's another
another story that I've been trying to push as well, because I think that the Kingdom is the best trio in the world, and OVE obviously thinks otherwise. And we have no bones about it. We're like, all right, let's do this. Let's make this happen. Unfortunately, we're both contracted to different companies in the U.S., but that doesn't mean it can't happen internationally. So if anyone out there is listening to this and they're across the border or across the pond or anywhere outside of the U.S., you're sitting on a gold mine between OVE and the Kingdom, because when those six guys get in the ring, it's going to be an all-out war. So the day that happens is a day a lot of people are going to be put on notice that there's another story that they need to sit down, get their popcorn, and get ready to enjoy.
if there is ever going to be a link between Impact and Ring of Honor again, I know there was some bad blood, and now Impact has new management, and they're really working hard on rehabbing that image that was ruined by previous TNA ownerships. I really think Kingdom OVE would be the linchpin to bring these two companies together and make a ton of money for everybody.
I mean, trust me, we're on that same bandwagon. Whenever this can happen, you know the Kingdom's not going to say no to it, and I don't think OVE is going to say no to it either. So we're both chomping out at the bit for this to happen. And again, it could be, if the two companies have any sort of agreement, we're down for. But we can see each other in any independent in England, in Germany, and Canada, Mexico, you name it, Australia. If you want to see OVE versus the Kingdom, any promotion outside of the United States can make that happen today.
Now, I want to finish this interview up and talk a little bit about the Honor Club girls. This is a group of ladies that I have become super friends with. I've gone to shows with some of them, and they were really instrumental in getting your attention to help get this interview done. I really do wish Petey was here for this. It would have been so much more fun. But I gotta ask you, you were kind of the poster child for this group of ladies who, and I try to tell people, and they laugh it off, but believe it or not, the Honor Club girls really has a lot more stroke and a lot more power for a group of ladies than people give them credit for within Ring of Honor.
They have a ton, and like they're it's funny because all those the Fire Festival documentaries came out, and they had all these things, talk about influencers and social media people that can kind of, when they say something, other people kind of jump around. Well, Honor Club girls, they're the influencers of Ring of Honor, and just them complaining alone and getting other people on their bandwagon about us not being on certain meet and greets that they were at, have like Ring of Honor office like moved around an entire meet and greet to make sure that like they catered to the Honor Club girls' wishes, because they were right. There was a meet and greet that we were moved on to in Texas, and all of a sudden we have the longest line because people might have not thought or might have not had the time to go and say, hey, we want the Kingdom there, but the Honor Club girls got that done, and then all these people were like, oh yeah, we wanted that to happen the whole time. And it's one of those things where you can really see the influence of fans that are knowledgeable and that know the product in and out, and that are truly loyal fans. I can remember seeing those girls way before they had a label on them as the Honor Club girls. I remember seeing those girls' faces in the crowd, or you kind of you recognize someone from Twitter if you see them post every once in a while, and then now I know all their names, first and last names at this point. But and B, again, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and I have to thank them a lot because they've jumped on the Matt Taven bandwagon, and they've made some noise, and they've helped this continued growth of my career. And they're a fantastic group of young ladies, and I want them to keep up that support that they have for Matt Taven. And if it gets me on great podcasts like this at the same time, then even more power to them.
Get you on. We begged you to come on this podcast. It wasn't like there was a long line. It's like, whoa, the Honor Club girls want Matt Taven. We're moving them to the line. It was like, all right, it's you or somebody that doesn't even have a name. It's like, Matt, please come on. Because I think Pete and I tried to get you on a couple months earlier, and we started like a weird Twitter thing between him and I, and tagged you in it, and that fell by the wayside really quick. And then I was going to a show with two of the girls, and I had mentioned, I said, I really want to talk to Matt. And they're like, you know what you need to do? I go, what? You go, tag us in a tweet, and we'll retweet it, and that will get his attention. And sure enough, right? Like, I would think that Petey Williams would be enough. No, Petey Williams is nothing. It's the Honor Club girls that got this done.
It's the numbers, Petey's just one guy. You're just one man. there's so many, those Honor Club girls, they keep multiplying, and then all of a sudden you see like, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. You go to check your phone, and you're like, oh, what are all these tweets about? And sure, they make it so you can't not see it.
They are phenomenal, and it was one of the things that I really tried to do was when we created this podcast was really get female influence involved. There are girls I'll reach out to and be like, what do you want to hear in a podcast? Is it is it the macho stuff? Is it this or that? And I've been trying to tailor, and Petey and I have been trying to tailor this. So when we sat down and then you're like, yes, I'll do it. I reached out to them like, what do you want to hear us talk about? So a lot of this is their influence and what they want to hear. And what kind of advice would you have to them now going forward? Because they have the voice, they have the air of Ring of Honor. They are using their powers for good, thank God. I mean, one snap and this whole thing could probably go sideways. What would you tell them going forward? How to, I don't know if the better brand themselves maybe, or to even have their voices heard even more. But going forward for a group of ladies that probably could be sitting on a gold mine of selling shirts and whatnot, what would you tell them?
Well, I think like the best part about them in the first place is that all those girls are knowledgeable wrestling fans, and they know the product and they know what they're talking about, which is the best part. Because like anyone, you see people try to go at them online and be like, "Oh, you're just thirsty for Matt Taven," and they just shut that down real quick, and they tell you exactly how long they've been there and everything they've seen, and like these Melvins that have barely even watch the product. I just want to, try to bust balls, get shot down real quick. But if I had any advice, is that, they're doing such a good job of shedding light on a female audience in wrestling that they just need to continue to grow and continue to not keep that label of the Honor Club girls as a small group. Keep it as like a building community, because there are so many female fans, and they get drowned out by these doofuses booing and trying to a lot of jealousy out there as far from male fans and stuff, and they kind of drowned out the voice of the ladies. But there's such a growing female audience, especially for Ring of Honor, that their voice is just louder the more and more it continues to grow in numbers. And there's so many awesome female fans that we meet out there all the time, and more girls that can wear that Honor Club label with pride. The better and the more stuff will get done for those Honor Club girls. So maybe it's a marketing thing that they need to think of. Shirts, buttons, hats, pins, whatever it needs. There's a Pro Wrestling Tees store for everyone. I know Ryan knows who they are at Pro Wrestling Tees, so maybe they start throwing out these Honor Club girl shirts, or even Ring of Honor should start pumping them out. And more people will feel that sense of pride if they feel like, hey, I got some backup with me. I got the girls to back me up.
That's well said, Matt. You have the 17th anniversary show coming up in Las Vegas. Hopefully, you come out as the champion, not co-champion, as one Bostonian to another. I am pulling for you. I know Petey's going for his buddy Jay Lethal, but that's why he's not here today.
That's why this podcast is better off without him.
Matt, where can people find you? Anything you want to promote? Do you have a pro wrestling T-shirt store?
I do. Matt Taven. If you know how to spell Taven, which is simple, but sometimes people mess it up, it's Taven. You can find me basically anywhere. Matt Taven, Facebook, Matt Taven at Twitter, the Matt Taven on Instagram, Matt Taven at Pro Wrestling Tees. I also have a YouTube show, Travel Taven, and a YouTube channel that you can find me at youtube.com/Matt Taven. But again, if you know how to spell my name, I'm easy to find, and if you follow Ring of Honor, it's hard to not figure out what I'm up to as well. So Ring of Honor Wrestling, or ROHWrestling.com.
I feel like we've become best friends now. 39 minutes, we're like BFFs now. I totally believe it.
Oh, without a doubt. You got my number now. Call me anytime.
Don't say that. That's no. But Matt, I appreciate your time. Hopefully this is not your last time here on the Wrestling Perspective. We'll talk to you soon,
Hey,
bud.
anytime. Anytime. It was a great conversation. So, from one Massachusettsite to another, anytime you want me, I'll be back on, and I'll make sure that at the 17th anniversary, I'll bring another title home to Boston because it's just been too long. We've been waiting too long for another title.
Way too long, and we're going to have a parade, a ticker tape parade for you.
Yeah, get those duck boats ready.